Recently, Vice President J.D. Vance made some comments on the Michael Knowles Show regarding how Trump's economy had produced better results than Milton Friedman and Reagan's economy. This has caused outrage from classical liberals and libertarians. These people call him socialist and progressive. This is the American economic dichotomy on full display. You're either a stone-cold capitalist or a full-blown socialist, nothing in between. And for any serious future, there needs to be a solution. That solution is not embracing either of these two wholeheartedly, but rather a dialectical synthesis of the two. That is, the resurrection of and revitalization of the American School of Economics for a new age. The American School of Economics was founded by Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton advocated for what was considered to be at the time a radical centralization of the government, which later turned out to be common sense to the people in charge. Hamilton called for the existence of a protective tariff, the construction of infrastructure using the federal government, and the creation of a central bank known back then as a national bank. This theory of economics became so prevalent in the years after his death that even notable liberals of his time period, such as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, would later employ much of his economic theory into actual practice. However, even after the death of Hamilton, the American School of Economics was revived and further expanded upon by Henry Charles Carey in his work, The Harmony of Interest, Agricultural, Manufacturing, and Commercial, published in 1851. In it, Carey denounces the economics practiced by the British Empire, which are decently close to the economic theory which classical liberals and libertarians promote. Instead, Carey proposes the path which America should follow has been right in front of them the entire time. The American system, which proposed nearly the same exact ideas as Alexander Hamilton's economics did about 50 years ago. This American system promoted self-sufficiency, protective tariffs, a central bank like Hamilton's, and infrastructure creation. Carey's influence extends further beyond that book. Eventually, he went on to serve as the chief economic advisor to Abraham Lincoln, the symbol of republicanism, and the ideals of which the GOP ought to strive to. Lincoln's economic approach involved heavy protective tariffs from northern industry, aggressive pioneer expansion out into the Great Plains, the expansion of the railroad system, which helped win the Civil War, and the construction of state universities to better serve the educational needs of the United States. While the pioneer expansion aspect of Lincoln's American system was in part of the American spiritual synthesis between the economics of Hamilton and the idea of an empire of liberty for Jefferson, the rest of it is purely the American school at work. The American School of Economics became the predominant economic philosophy of the dominant party of the time, the Republicans. The Republicans were founded not only as just an anti-slavery party, but as a proponent of the American school, after all. Figures such as William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, even less economically interventionist figures, such as Calvin Coolidge, were all proponents of the American school in their own expressions. However, the American School of Economics, like the Republican Party, was shattered by one event: the Great Depression. The Great Depression is still the most formative event to the Republican Party today, even more so than it was to the Democratic Party. While the Democratic Party quickly rallied around New Dealism, the GOP was left to question itself for almost 50 years about the path it would take. Initially, the GOP did turn a bit into a rebranded New Dealism rather than a continuation of the American school of President Eisenhower. Then after Kennedy and LBJ, the GOP shifted towards perhaps the last American school-style president in Richard Nixon. Although he was not a perfect incarnation of the theory, throughout his time there began to be a new idea in terms of how the GOP should approach economics. While during the era of FDR and Truman from 1933 to 1953, Republicans really just stood around as weak opposition, perhaps until around 1946 when they finally retook the Congress. The Eisenhower era would provide the real staging grounds for this new economic theory, however. During this time, writers such as William F. Buckley, Milton Friedman, Murray Rothbard, and Frank Meyer began to predominate American conservative thought, though in fairness to Friedman and Rothbard, they were predominantly economists, not politicians. However, in the case of Frank Meyer, and especially William F. Buckley, they not only intentionally lied, but also actively destroyed the entirety of the traditions of American conservatism held for nearly 200 years at that point. William F. Buckley especially deserves all the distaste he gets in the modern right-wing sphere. If it were up to me, I would have every article and book ever written by William F. Buckley be burned in a public ceremony and permanently censored on the internet. That is how much damage he has caused, not to just the GOP, but America in general. Buckley would essentially scrap the entirety of American conservatism and rewrite history with an actual conservative tradition, supposedly starting not with Hamilton, not even Jefferson, but William F. Buckley. His own theory of fusionism, which combined faux social conservatism, though not admittedly, with economic liberalism, essentially made the modern GOP into a Frankenstein of contradictory ideas which never fleshed out into theory. The GOP Frankenstein first came out in the form of Barry Goldwater in 1964, and would subsequently take control of GOP politics in 1980 with Ronald Reagan for nearly the next 40 years. These are what you see when somebody says, I'm an old guard conservative. No, you're not an old guard conservative. You're not even conservative. No fusionist is an honest conservative. While I myself am not a MAGA fan, however, I will admit that I see Trump as a singular step in the right direction towards where the GOP has to go in terms of economics. I mean this genuinely as well. The rise of Trump has been in turn a rejection of the fake Buckley and a beginning of the revitalization of the American school once again. Trump's heterodoxy was not just a game. It is the actual orthodoxy of what the GOP was. It was never this religious devotion to capitalism, such as Ronald Reagan or William F. Buckley or even Milton Friedman would have you believe. In fact, most of these figures never even called themselves conservative. Ronald Reagan, in an interview, considered himself as a libertarian. Milton Friedman explicitly denied he was a conservative, and probably most likely identified with the libertarian label. Only William F. Buckley was as disingenuous to inform himself to people as a conservative when he never was. But Trump is different. He is far more like Lincoln in terms of policy than many would like to admit, and he is the most Lincoln since Nixon or Eisenhower. But while Trump is a step, he is not the solution at all. The new GOP must embrace a new American school of economics, one which rejects the free trade heterodoxy, the libertarian laissez-faire approach, the fetishization of GDP, the idea of people as mere economic units, and an entire religious rejection of the dogma of the religion of efficiency. However, Trump is only a step and not a full course correction. What would a neo-American school of economics propose that would dominate a Republican Party? While a simple idea at its core, it's also far more nuanced than it may seem. The best way to propose this economic idea is to display it as a sort of class collaborationist style of economics. The rich can have their pie, but the poor must be able to have theirs too. The capitalist worship, which is connected to how these fusionists believe it is today, sky-high profits, and a lack of correlation between wages and productivity, the working people have become 2 times as productive and have not really gained any serious increase of real wages. The socialists and the Democrats fetishize poor people as an ultimate good, and the rotten capitalists as ontologically evil who must be destroyed. Neither class is good. They just act in their own interest. Under the neo-American school of economics, this class conflict will be steered towards national prosperity and unity by giving everyone a newer and more improved square deal. Think about it like this. Issues such as housing, continual mass immigration, domestic reshoring, domestic production of natural resources, artificial intelligence. The list could genuinely go on for hours. All of these are imperative issues which not only must be answered by this revived economic school, but must also have plans put into action. To end this video, I want to emphasize closely the dichotomy which hyper-politicized economic worshippers of laissez-faire capitalism and socialism have. This phenomenon has been written about before, and not by an American or about America directly. Over a century ago, in 1919, German philosopher and historian Oswald Spengler wrote about his vision for German economics in an essay titled Prussianism and Socialism. In it, he described a false dichotomy, at least in his German nationalist view, of capitalism versus class socialism that came out of the British school of economic thought, be it the Manchester School for Capitalism or the Fabian/Marxist School for Class Socialism. America, descendant of Britain, still goes through this mindset unconsciously, and it comes to show that even centuries of separation never changes an old soul. America today, especially on the right, still can't go beyond this British in nature dichotomy of capitalism versus socialism and views any detraction from one of these two as being their enemy. This is because a lot of right-wingers cling on to almost a pseudo-religious belief, and instead of looking to God in a profoundly spiritual way, instead turn their political beliefs into their own dogma. This debate is something that serves in a sense as a battle between two sects over the future of the GOP's economic positions. This is one that has major stakes in it. Whether or not the GOP walks the way of the dinosaurs, of course if the Libertarians win out, or in the revamping and renewal of the American system and potential electoral domination for decades. Nonetheless, this video served as a talking point to give a rebuke to the outright lies spread by many of the classical liberals and libertarians about what conservatism actually is, and as a response to a talking point which I personally became very invested in over on X in the past couple days. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.